Testing 1, 2. Hey, hey. Testing 1, 2. Hey, hey.
So much for coming. Please take your seat. All right, thank you so much for coming, everybody. And please welcome me and please join me in welcoming Mayor Cavalier Johnson to the stage.
All right, well, good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. If you haven't started, please do begin eating. As was mentioned, my name is Cavalier Johnson. I'm mayor of this fine city, Milwaukee. Yeah, you can clap it up for that. So it really is my great honor to welcome you all here for a critical and timely conversation about global threats and opportunities facing our country today, and how America's role in the world matters more than ever to local communities, including right here in Milwaukee. I'm honored to be here not only with all of you, but with a true champion in the United States Congress. That's our representative, United States Representative Gwen Moore. Please give her a round of applause. Gwen is a mentor and a friend and the fighter from the fourth here in Milwaukee. And I want to thank as well the U.S. Global Leadership Coalition for bringing us together this morning. I'd also like to thank our incredible event partner, the Rotary Club of Milwaukee, for being here today. So please give a round of applause for the Rotary Club. Thank you. This powerful group of leaders from around the state are Republicans, they're Democrats, they're independents, they're pillars in academic, business, humanitarian, and faith communities. They're civic officials, they're military veterans, and have all arrived at the same conclusion. And that conclusion is this: America must continue to be the global leader. America must continue to be the global leader. We all read the news, so we know there's no shortage of global threats facing our country today, as well as global opportunities. Global threats, global opportunities. And it's our hope that the dynamic conversation you'll hear today will inspire you to continue in this vital discussion about America's role in the world with your family, with your friends, and with colleagues, and the new ways in which the United States is providing foreign assistance in more effective ways than ever before. Now, to tell us a little bit more about the USGLC's work here in the region and around the country, I'd like to welcome Alex Grant, the USGLC's National Outreach Director. Please give a round of applause for Alex Grant as he approaches the stage.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Mayor Johnson. We are so excited for to be here today. I'm Alex Grant, the National Outreach Director for the USGLC, and I want to thank our Wisconsin Advisory Committee members who helped make our program possible. And again, want to thank our featured speakers, Congresswoman Gwen Moore and the Deputy CEO, Chidi Blyden, for being here with us today. Before we get underway, I really want to take a few moments to explain who the USGLC is and why it's so important that you chose to be here with us today this afternoon. At the USGLC, we bring together that diverse network of leaders from all 50 states, as well as over 500 American businesses and humanitarian organizations, military veterans, faith-based leaders, foreign policy luminaries who all come together around the importance of our civilian tools of national power, development, and diplomacy. Our coalition represents a rich spectrum of backgrounds and experiences, from USGLC's year-long leadership training Next Gen program to our Farmers for Prosperity initiative. Our network spans from coast to coast throughout the country, from Maine to Arizona, Washington to Florida, to right here in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and everywhere in between. Our bipartisan National Advisory Council, made up of our nation's smartest national security and foreign policy minds, former secretaries of state, national security advisors, and leading former members of Congress. And we're particularly proud of our growing voice in the military community, who understand better than most the critical role that international development and diplomacy plays in our national security toolkit. We have a National Security Advisory Council that's co-chaired by Admiral James Stavridis and General Anthony Zinni, and comprised of over 260 retired general and flag officers. Our Veterans for Smart Power initiative is made up of over 30,000 veterans across the country who are committed to strengthening our non-military tools. And what brings us all together is what the mayor said earlier, a shared belief in American global leadership. We believe that strategic investments in diplomacy and development are essential because it protects our national security, it advances our economic interest, and it projects the very best of American values. That's why we talk about how a tiny 1% of the federal budget, which is called the International Affairs budget, is one of the most cost-effective and powerful investments that America can make. And it's why we've been asking our communities around the country, foreign aid, what's it worth? So now it's your turn to tell us what it's worth to you. So grab a card off your table, jot down your thoughts about how global engagement matters to your community, and then leave it on the table and we'll collect it afterwards. And we've done this around the country, and we've heard from local leaders that diplomacy, food security, global economic security, those things really matter to many of these leaders, and here's why. Diplomacy is funding American diplomats and embassies around the world, supporting our key allies, including working with NATO, to stand up for freedom as Ukraine fights against Russia's unprovoked war. And feeding the world is about tackling the growing global food crisis and preventing malnutrition in kids and other vulnerable communities. And global economic security is vital because it supports the 1 in 5 jobs in the U.S. maintained by international trade and American businesses that rely on global markets to strengthen our economic stability here at home. And it can be tough to see past the current headlines and global challenges, but we get an incredible return on our investment for the small expenditure. And we have seen tremendous progress over the past several decades. Since 1990, the number of people that are living in extreme poverty around the world, living on less than $1.25 a day, has been cut in half. That's 1 billion fewer people living in extreme poverty today. For every $1 the U.S. spends to prevent conflict, it saves $16 in response cost. And today, 11 of our top 15 trading partners are former recipients of U.S. aid. And now the fastest growing economies are in the low and middle income countries, and American businesses are investing in these opportunities, including companies from right here in Wisconsin. Last year alone, more than 8,800 companies in Wisconsin exported over $28 billion in goods to foreign markets. This economic progress is made possible with investments from agencies such as the Millennium Challenge Corporation, the U.S. Trade and Development Agency, and the U.S. Export-Import Bank, all of which are funded by portions of this 1% budget. So you're all here to make sure that we build on this important progress. So while we address the headlines of the day, and I want to thank you for being part of our journey to help build a better, safer, more prosperous world. So now I'd like to invite Mary McCormick, Executive Director of the Rotary Club of Milwaukee, to tell us, in her words, why American global leadership matters to her. Welcome, Mary.
Good morning, everyone. Yes, I am Mary. Well, good morning. I am Mary McCormick, the Executive Director of the Rotary Club of Milwaukee, and we have many great Rotarians here in the room today. I'm also a proud member of the USGLC's Wisconsin Advisory Committee, and I am here today because of the strong alignment of the mission and the values of Rotary and USGLC. Milwaukee Rotary is one of 44,000 Rotary clubs around the globe, and Rotary and its members have a long history of over a century of promoting peace and working to address the underlying causes of conflict in communities around the world. A fun fact, Rotary was present at the start of the United Nations. Rotary International was one of 42 organizations invited to consult with the U.S. delegation to the United Nations conference that took place in San Francisco in 1945. Today, Rotary International still holds the UN's highest consultative status offered to any NGO. We are proud to partner with the United Nations. Another fun fact, in 1979, Rotary International initiated the global effort to eradicate polio. Since then, members of Rotary have contributed more than $2 billion and hundreds and countless hours, actually, of volunteer time to protect 3 billion children around the world in 122 countries against this paralyzing disease. Rotary's advocacy has played a role in decisions by governments to contribute more than $10 billion to this effort and brought the Bill Gates Foundation to the table. Healthy kids make a safer world. At this critical time in the 21st century, we see the United States foreign assistance providing foreign assistance in new and more effective ways. And Rotary is one of a myriad of organizations around the world partnering with our government to work tirelessly to make the world a better and safer place. I just have to say that our club is especially proud of the work that we do in Guatemala. And again, we're trying to build the infrastructure so that people thrive in the countries that live just south of us. Just as importantly, though, and what brings us here today is that we understand that leading globally matters locally to those of us in Milwaukee. America's global engagement creates jobs, strengthens our national security and our local security, and expands market for hardworking folks here at home. Now, I'm going to turn to someone who I know shares this belief. Alex Danuccio, who's a senior communications manager at Cargill, and you're really going to like this title. He is the manager of Food Solutions, North America Starches, Sweeteners and Texturizers, Cocoa and Chocolate, and Indulgence for Cargill. So we'll have to see if he's going to tell us what that really means.
Thank you, Mary, for that awesome introduction. Good morning, everybody. I'm Alex Danucci. I'll keep my title a little shorter, but just as a reminder, Senior Communications Manager at Cargill. As a proud sponsor of USGLC's Heartland Initiative, Cargill believes promoting global development is central to demonstrating American values and advancing our interests around the world. In fact, a global view is baked into our company's purpose: to nourish the world in a safe, responsible, and sustainable way. And through partnerships and hard work, we bring this belief to life. Every day, each and every one of us touches or eats something that Cargill had a role in growing, making, or shipping. It might be a hamburger from ground beef packaged here in Milwaukee. Maybe you made s'mores last weekend with a chocolate bar made with ingredients from our Milwaukee cocoa and chocolate facility. And we all know how important dairy is to Wisconsin, but did you know that Cargill serves a lot of Wisconsin dairy farmers and producers with animal nutrition and risk management solutions? This relevance to everyday lives plays an important role in other parts of the world as well. In 2006, Cargill opened a cocoa plant in the West African country of Ghana. For 4 years, this is one of the most advanced plants in the world. Getting this facility online was a tall task, and we couldn't have done it alone. We work closely with the U.S. government, negotiating land, aligning each country's development plan, and navigating challenging circumstances. For more than 15 years, Cargill and our partner CARE have been working to combat the many challenges facing the cocoa sector in West Africa. Through this partnership, we provide agricultural training and improved inputs to farmers, work on diversifying income, empowering women, improving access to finance, and ensuring food security. These investments of time, diplomacy, and people power showed a shared belief that countries like Ghana can play a pivotal role globally and positively impact local communities like Milwaukee. In our local cocoa and chocolate facility, hardworking men and women from the Milwaukee area rely on hardworking men and women from countries like Ghana to grow and process the cocoa beans they need to make a whole range of chocolate products to serve our customers, from mom and pop chocolatiers to the makers of global consumer brands. The flow of cocoa into chocolate is just one of many examples of how challenging conditions in countries across the globe can impact our economies right here at home. This is just one reason that we at Cargill are passionate about promoting and strengthening global development and its connection to American prosperity. It is my honor to introduce two distinguished speakers who will help us make sense of what America's global leadership looks like in today's ever-changing world. Chidi Blyden is a national security expert who serves as the Deputy Chief Executive Officer of the Millennium Challenge Corporation, where she delivers on their mission to reduce global poverty through economic growth. She has held various positions in the U.S. government, including serving as the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for African Affairs, where she managed the Department of Defense's relationships with 53 African nations. And Congresswoman Gwen Moore, a dedicated public servant of 35 years, represents Wisconsin's 4th District. She was the first African-American woman elected to Congress from the state of Wisconsin and serves on the powerful Ways and Means Committee. From her work in Congress to her years of service in the Wisconsin legislature, she knows firsthand why we must invest in all our tools of national power, development and diplomacy alongside defense to keep America safe, secure, and prosperous. And we'll welcome back USGLC's Alex Grant to the stage to moderate the discussion. Chidi, Congresswoman Moore, we are grateful to you for joining us, and we look forward to learning from you and with you today. Thank you.
I will warn you, these seats are extremely comfortable, as I found out yesterday, and almost took a nap, and my colleagues did not appreciate that as we were setting up. But welcome for being with us here today. We're really excited to have you both. I know. I'll wake you up when it's time for your question here. We have some note cards on the table. We'll be taking audience questions. So as we're having the conversation, just write down your questions. We'll have our staff walking around to collect those from everyone today. But want to start off with a heavy topic, unfortunately, which is the way of the world at the moment, which is the amount of global crises that we're seeing. Because today, global landscape is really characterized by these crises of extraordinary scale. Global poverty has increased for the first time in decades, resulting in a record number of people needing humanitarian assistance. It's 1 in every 27. So just looking at this room here, think about that. 1 in every 27 people around the world are in need of humanitarian assistance. At the same time, ongoing wars in Europe and the Middle East, strategic competition with China, threaten U.S. national security and place a premium on thoughtful and sustained U.S. diplomacy. Congresswoman Moore, when the National Security Supplemental passed a few months ago, you said that global stability and peace are being threatened by rogue regimes, and the threat of the chaos they represent, once unleashed, will not easily be contained and will ultimately fall hardest on those most vulnerable. What role should America play on the world stage to protect our economic and security interests in the complex and dangerous world? And how can our civilian development and diplomacy tools really, alongside defense, strengthen that stability?
Well, let me start out by thanking you for that softball question.
Right?
Yeah. I regard myself as a peaceful person. And one of the things that I learned through my stewardship, not only as a member of Congress, but as a member of the Helsinki Commission, as a member of the House Democracy Partnership, and just my role as a member of Congress, navigating all of the conflicts, that I'm a peaceful person, but I'm not a pacifist. Mm-hmm. And there is a real distinction. I say that to say that I do think that NATO is a very important engagement. The United States and our current president, Joe Biden, has leaned forward in a way. As I look at the map, and I look at the position of Ukraine and what is happening, it really is a hinge pin in a domino with regard to the ambitions of Vladimir Putin to recreate his Soviet Union. And that there should be no questions that other countries in that region would be at risk. I would have people note that countries like Norway and Sweden and Finland, who had been historically neutral, all of a sudden wanted to join NATO. And I think that that was indicative of a reality, not just their perception, but a reality that there was a risk of the increasing authoritarian aims of not only Vladimir Putin, but other places in Europe. I mean, you got Viktor Orban. You have, we often talk about how China is already an authoritarian regime. And as we look at countries like Taiwan, that we depend on so much for economic engagement and making the chips that we invented and created, but supplying them worldwide. Those are our allies. And as we look at, I'm not going to hog up all the time by answering this question, but yes, NATO, I think, is extremely important. Israel. Israel is our ally. And there's been a lot of consternation and lots of back and forth. I've had lots of protesters at my house over the winter and time. They nicknamed me Genocide Gwen. I'll forgive them for that someday. But I do understand the pain and agony that's being felt by ordinary citizens in that area. And it's a conflict that at this point, there's a risk of it becoming a regional war. And, I'm not gonna say that, what I'm gonna say is that there are bad people on both sides, not good people on both sides, but bad people on both sides. I'm very disappointed that as an ally, a strong ally of Israel, we have someone in Prime Minister or President Netanyahu who is unwilling to let go of his ambitions of being sort of an authoritarian in that region and not wanting to share power or land with its neighbors. And it puts us in a strange position because we are an ally. And, United States often has a reputation of abandoning its allies. And so this is a conundrum. It's sort of like your cousin Pookie, when they start a fight down the street, or in this case, Israel did start it, but you have to defend part of your family. And the one reason they would do is because there are a lot, that's a rough neighborhood. We got Hamas and Hezbollah and Hutus. We have so many global terrorist organizations that are reigning in the areas in Iran and Lebanon. And if you look at the map, you can see that Israel was getting fire from like all of its neighbors. And its relationship with Egypt is very tenuous because Egypt is tired of all the refugees and so I think that our position in the world and our support of other people in the world is absolutely essential for maintaining some stasis. I'll say this before I hand it back over to you, Alex. Even though we've had numbers of UN resolutions and people criticizing Israel, and the United States has been the only ones that have vetoed some of this stuff or not voted for it, we're the only ones that have been at that table every single day, trying to bring some peace, trying to broker some sort of settlement in that region. And I'm so proud of the United States' position and what we have tried to do. We got the only president that's ever gone into a war zone in the middle of a war, as President Biden has done. And so I think that even though the world is in disarray, I think the United States is playing a very positive, face-forward role without, at this point, having any boots on the ground. And as we get into this discussion further, I think we're going to realize that our investments, our engagement, our diplomacy, that it is in lieu of having boots on the ground and being engaged in conflicts.
Mm-hmm. And thank you for that overview, that backdrop of the world we're in right now, because it is an incredibly difficult time. And you look at the economic angle, and there is some positive elements there. And want to congratulate Millennium Challenge Corporation on their 20th anniversary this year. MCC was created in 2004 by President Bush, and it had broad bipartisan support.
Yeah.
Delivers impactful U.S. foreign assistance by focusing on evidence-based policies, country-led solutions, transparent results. So thinking about the context of our conversation here, can you really share with us kind of that broad overview of MCC, not as well known perhaps across the country, and its unique approach to development compared to USAID or some other agencies, and how is it situated to strengthen the global stability at the moment?
Well, thanks, Alex, for the question. And thank you to all the warm welcome that I've received coming to Milwaukee for the first time. The warm may be a bit of a stretch given that it is a cool 75 degrees outside, which I'm pleasantly happy to be a part of. But Alex, to your question, I think I want to pick up where I think Rep. Moore just left off, and that is, using all the tools of the U.S. foreign policy and national security and diplomatic toolkit. And MCC was founded, as you said, 20 years ago, big 20. We're a young agency, but we were really born out of the Bush administration's desire to look at development from a very different way. You mentioned something that I think is really critical, not just to what we think about when we think about international development, but as we think about domestic issues as well. And that's the accountability, the transparency, and the credibility of working with other democracies that are sharing our values, but also want to build and develop their economies in a way that helps for global stability. So really thinking about MCC's model, when I think about it, we're a small agency. We call ourselves small and mighty. We have sort of $1 billion budget that allows us to do what we call compact programs and threshold programs. Our compact programs, typically very large, and it's an infrastructure-focused project that brings some sort of transformative change that helps to reduce poverty through economic growth. An example of this is currently we're working with the Mozambican government to create or recreate a bridge that was lost between the north and southern part of the country. This bridge will allow for additional trade to happen without having to go outside of the country, go to a neighboring country, and then come back in, just for goods to be able to flow from the southern part of the country to the north. That's the kind of transformative change that we're talking about that MCC has been able to provide. The other part of that is our ability to be able to support our partners who are looking for policy and institutional reforms. This is something that I think speaks to what Rep. Moore was saying, those values that we bring. Being able to have stable institutions lead to stable economies, lead to stable governments, lead to stable democracies, and then you are able to exercise those types of tools more than you are the sort of last resort defense tools that have become so prevalent in the recent days that we're seeing in global crisis. So MCC was really born out of this philosophy that you can reduce poverty through economic growth, helping low to middle income countries to be able to help lift themselves out of poverty. We're accountable for every dollar that we spend. We're accountable to not just American taxpayers, but to the governments that are sharing this partnership with us. I think, when people think about foreign assistance, I think you were giving us the statistics that 1% of our government's budget can go such a long way. And foreign assistance, I think generally in the US government is roughly about 4% when you look at all of the development agencies across the board. But we're doing a lot of good work. And MCC's role in that is to try and make sure that we are a small and mighty agency that brings infrastructure, policy, institutional reforms to help build the types of economies that bring global stability.
Small, but certainly mighty.
Small and mighty.
Very mighty. Well, I want to go back to NATO, because you mentioned this a little bit earlier, Congresswoman. And last month, NATO leaders met actually in Washington, D.C. to mark the alliance's 75th anniversary. It's the anniversary year for everyone, I think, this year. Plan out the future. The strength of this alliance has really been on full display, especially in the wake of Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine. Now, Congresswoman, in your work on the Commission on Security and Cooperation in Europe, you've spoken out about the importance of strengthening the U.S.-NATO alliance. How does the NATO alliance really help deter conflict abroad while protecting American interests at home and abroad as well?
Well, it's not just the presence of Article 5, which, as you all know, means, if you attack one, then you've attacked all of us, that treaty. But it is the other engagements, the other just engagement that made even the release of the prisoners possible. That level of diplomacy and relationships, the relationships that enable our country to ask another country to become less dependent upon the Soviet Union for fuel products in order to have that be a contribution toward the alliance. It's relational, not just because of Article 5, but because of the treaty brings that kinship and friendship together. I just want to respond to something that Chidi said I thought was so important about MCC and the 20th anniversary. It was also a response to many people in the United States feeling like, well, what good is it doing us to just give stuff to Africa? And the response to Africa saying, look, we want to do business. We want to do trade with the United States. We don't want a handout. We want some economic development. And so MCC, and by the way, Alice already told me that you just, she didn't exaggerate when she told me how wonderful you were going to be at all. But I just wanted to lift that up, that MCC is really only 20 years old, but it is the framework from which we're going to stand up our relationship with doing a lot more business with Africa and maybe even at some point with South America. Because the reality is that 95% of the world's population lives somewhere else other than the United States of America. And so we can't just isolate ourselves. And so just as a closing to your question about NATO, there's so many critics of NATO from the far left to the far right. You get the same arguments from the left and from the right. Why don't we just make America great again and stay at home and don't deal with anybody else? Why don't we try to foster peace by withdrawing from the world and withdrawing all sort of things? It's more than just firepower. You're withdrawing relationships that enable us to be responsive to people in the world.
And we talked about the small and mighty team of MCC, and one of the elements of the mighty has been the game-changing reforms that this agency has enacted to ensure that federal assistance the programs are transparent, accountable, effective, and evidence-based. And MCC has been ranked as the world's most transparent bilateral donor for 7 years running for a commitment to transparent. Yeah, applause for that, for sure. So, Chidi, how does the MCC demonstrate its dedication to accountability, to transparency, and how does this really maximize American taxpayer dollars?
Well, by statute, we are mandated to follow a specific eligibility criteria that really looks at, three focal areas, looking at how democracy is delivering for its people, looking at freedom of information, rule and just practices and reforms that are allowing a democracy or a society to thrive, as well as looking at the control of corruption. Those are our three hard hurdles, and any country that can pass those alongside another series of factors that we have as part of our scorecard. And so when people talk about MCC, the number one thing that they typically can remember is, yes, we do large infrastructure projects that are transformative, but then that we have this scorecard practice. And this scorecard has really helped us to set apart a certain standard that helps to allow democracies to really deliver for their people. And it's something very clear that we can give to our partners that we work with and sit down at the table together and say, look, if you are looking to really see a difference in your economy, these are the constraints to where you're able to grow. We want to help you get to that, but you have to make sure that these things are also part of a growing economy, a growing society. And a lot of those are built or based in democratic values. I think, we have looked at, democratic governance as a way to really help an economy thrive. And so when we look at the countries that we work with, we are selective. We have to see that there is a positive trajectory. We have to see that there is a commitment, and we have a very time-bound process. We're not just out there willy-nilly, just being out there for 10 years working on a project. This compact is timed. It is constrained to the amount of money that we are able to dedicate to it, and it is done through country ownership. This means that we sit down from the very beginning with the country and we say, all right, these are the things that you want to do. These are the things that we think we can help you do, but you have to drive this. This gets back to, I think, what Rep. Moore was saying also about us being able to really work with the country and not isolate ourselves. We're sharing not just the American values that we have around democracy, but capability and capacity. How do you run a corporate structure like MCC? We literally stand up with a partner country, their own sort of corporate structure with a CEO, with a deputy CEO, with a board, and show them how to do this over the 5-year period that they administer the money. And so that accountability falls back on the country, but we are also able to look from a taxpayer perspective or from the US side and say, we have helped build something and a model of something that a country can work with that long lives our project capacity. After we're long and gone, the country still has the ability to be able to carry on those same values: accountability, transparency, management of a large-scale infrastructure project. And those are oftentimes secondary effects that bleed into the government and allow them to be able to continue the type of democratic governance structures that make it the successful project that it is.
It's fascinating. It's really incredible work. And Congressman Moore, one of the core messages of USGLC we've talked a lot about today is that global stability leads to American security. What happens globally matters locally, to put it a little bit more simply. Our health, our economy, our security are related to our interest, our investments in global development and diplomacy. And at a time when many Americans and members of Congress, you mentioned the far left and the far right are focused on very real challenges at home, but often question perhaps the investments here. How do you make your case to make that case to your colleagues that these small investments in international affairs programs are advancing American interest here at home and should be prioritized?
Well, I said I wasn't going to do this, Chidi, but I'm going to do it. I just think about the most recent trips that I've had to Africa with the Ways and Means Committee. Ways and Means is the oldest committee in Congress, and one of the things that they're responsible for is trade. So we were on a trade mission for AGOA, the African Growth and Opportunity Act, which is another element and things that I'd like to talk about at some point. I'm also a member of the House Democracy Partnership, where we sort of have exchanges parliament to parliament to sort of strengthen their institutions. I say that, because many of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, I am a Democrat, they have, they see us as being, the United States is providing all this aid. And, we've got, Chidi and I were looking over the appropriations sheets and looking at this huge 12% cut in foreign affairs and the impact that it would have. And some of my colleagues need to actually see what they're sort of defunding. We went to Kenya, for example, and there was this big debate about, well, why are we over here helping them? Looks like they're doing all right. Why should we be bothered? And then when they started seeing, they pulled the curtain back and they looked at Kenya as a partner. Kenya is someone who sent a lot of soldiers over here to our hemisphere to protect Haitians. Here we have, in our hemisphere, gangs running a country, and it is Kenya that is put boots on the ground, not us. You know, Kenyans are having a terrible time, you know, in the seas, in the Indian Ocean, off their shores with the Chinese doing illegal fishing, taking all the protein from that area from people. And our aid, you know, enables them to be somewhat protective. In exchange, they are the tip of the spear, literally, against all of the gangs and terrorist organizations that operate in that region. That is a dangerous neighborhood. And as people have said, it is a partner that is fighting that perhaps we have to do. Because, you know, our enemies have shown us that they have the ability to fly over here and to disrupt American life. And so, you know, you leave them scratching their heads when they see just how much Kenya is paying into this partnership. There are always questions about, well, you know, China is investing so much in this area. They're building stuff and they're doing stuff. So, duh, why wouldn't a developing country take aid from wherever they can, even if it's at usury prices, even if it means China brings their own workforce over there and doesn't expand yours? You know, instead of us criticizing people's partnership with China, you know, if we want to protect our interests, like China would take any freshwater port they can. You know, and you think about where Kenya is located, right there on the Indian Ocean, or you can just flip right over on the other side of the world, Ghana or any of those other West African countries. China would be very happy to build themselves a military base in that area. Madagascar, Mauritius, those are little small islands where United States, like Mauritius, we have a presence on those islands, and China would love for us to just disrupt that relationship so that they could fill that void, either having their own military base there or just take over all of the fishing. Uh-oh, I heard somebody tapping. Does that mean I need to shut up?
No, you're good.
I have been chastened by the gavel. You know, I'm used to somebody with a gavel and to start banging it. So I heard that tapping and I thought, but yeah, there's no such thing as economic development being disconnected from health and other things as well. I mean, I was just sort of looking at this pathetic appropriation foreign operations bill. I was sharing it with Chidi, but we have so much at risk, you know, other than just world security, the threat to women's health. I went to several projects, AIDS projects where we're saving women's lives through our assistance and our aid. USAID. We went to the Gambia right as they were considering a bill on female genital mutilation, of a sort of overriding a bill that stopped it. And we were right there, right at that moment, to be able to talk to some of the legislators and having them hold on so that they could tamp down that human rights violation. Family planning. We met children who had grown up with AIDS. Climate change. We talked about South America. You know, we have the former president, for example, talking about how our borders are being overrun. A lot of these people are climate refugees. You know, and our vice president, Kamala Harris, supposedly the borders are, her duties were to go over to South America and find out what's going on there that's causing this big exodus. What if we could have an aid program that would mitigate the climate crisis, that would help them with their policing and to stand up against the drug cartels and this kind of thing. This is the solution to have, a presence there instead of just criticizing them. So, without getting too far off the topic, I just want to say that our national security is not the only the only thing, and it's also money. I mean, I think just in June, almost $500,000 worth of $500 billion, maybe $465 million of exports came from Wisconsin. And so we got some skin in the game.
Absolutely. Chidi, you're on deck for a climate question here in a second here. But I'm curious because one of the things you said is it's about seeing that work in action.
Yeah.
I'm just curious for the audience, raise your hand if you've had the opportunity to kind of see what these investments have done overseas, where it's development work. See a couple of hands popping up here. And these stories that you all have are what need to be told. That's where the power really comes from to create transformative change. I think for many members of many members of the community that are maybe doubtful of how this impacts. And we talked about climate change. We talked about it a little bit earlier, even because we know it is inextricably tied to poverty and stagnating economic growth around the world. In Wisconsin, rising temperatures in particular posing a public health risk in urban areas, and also threaten the $2 billion fishing industry in the state. And like many in the room today, I know MCC is committed to addressing climate change through sustainable climate measures. They invest roughly 40% of its program funds to climate-related activities. So how are y'all doing this? How is MCC tackling the transnational challenge of climate change across low-income countries where you work, and how does that commitment, again, to transparency and effectiveness really maximize that impact?
I think you've laid it out fairly nicely. Like, it is a transnational challenge. I want to maybe just touch on something that the representative said here. 2/3 of our programs have been in Africa, and what she experienced in Africa and visiting the nations that she's visited, MCC has given over $10 billion in our 20 years of investment in Africa. But it also, I think, speaks to what could be done in other areas of the world. We are a global agency, and we work in places like Kosovo. We've worked in Belize, in the Latin America and Caribbean. We've had previous programs in Guyana and Guatemala and Honduras. And to this question of climate being such a transnational challenge, I think you have to think about other areas of the world that could be, I don't want to say propped up because that's the wrong word, but could be supported and could be enabled to be able to be a greater contributor to the global economies that we're looking at. And I think one of the things that MCC is really looking at is to try and expand its work beyond, not just in different sectors. Currently, we work in agriculture, we work in energy, we touch on climate. The representative mentioned, sort of the impact of, women's rights, human rights, and all of these things that lead to, stronger democracies. The U.S. has a role to play in that, and MCC, I may be biased, has a really specific toolkit that could support that. And I think one of the areas that we are trying to expand, and this gets back to legislation, the representative and I were talking about this a little bit earlier, is that MCC is trying to expand its candidate pool legislation bill on the Hill. And we are trying to ensure that we can have more candidates in the pool of people that we can pull, and the pool of countries that we can pull from to actually do our work. And why we're doing that is because, one, we have worked in several countries a lot of times, and we have seen the change. We've seen them been able to sustain it. But we've also seen the secondary and tertiary effects. As the Congresswoman already said, she's mentioned, development leads to stronger and more stable economies. We haven't really, I think, tapped into what that could mean in Europe, where we have energy challenges, and we haven't seen where that could really help things like immigration and climate transnational challenges in South America, or what folks are calling the global South. So to turn directly to the climate question, I did want to mention just sort of the linkage between how where we have worked has shown what we can do in other places to be able to strengthen our foreign policy and our development. As far as MCC's climate initiatives, we have committed to supporting climate initiatives and the impact of climate change. Wisconsin aside, you've got wonderful weather, and I think I've even heard that the winters have become milder. But we have committed to making sure that our programs have some sort of climate initiative included in every project or compact that we do. And things like that mean that we're looking at committing 50% of our program funding to climate-related investments by 2025. We are on track to meet this particular commitment, but we have also integrated climate and natural capital considerations into our constraints to economic growth. That means, what is keeping a particular country from, reaching its economic growth potential. I just came back from Lesotho, where I am been very interested in this small, tiny country. Something that reminds me of MCC. Ability to be able to provide agriculture products and produce, not just to its surrounding countries, but to the whole southern region. Mm-hmm. Right now, on 1 hectare of land, you're able to see the production that could help feed an entire community. That multiplied and exponentially grown has the ability to be able to help not just the country, not just its neighboring countries, but also the region. And so what we needed to do in Lesotho was help them understand what could unlock this potential. What we found out was a lot of it was focused around irrigation. Mm-hmm. And so looking at the ability to be able to irrigate natural resources, the river, into inland parts that farmers could access is a climate adaptation or environmental change that's going to lead to increase in the ability for them to be able to grow more on their land and therefore produce more and therefore trade more and supply more, not just in their local area. I think the other thing that we're committed to doing is understanding that reliable infrastructure is critical for economic growth. We are seeing the impacts of climate change on the type of infrastructure that has been built maybe in the past, but we're now having to think about new considerations. In the Africa context, I saw this a lot working in my previous role, what the sand can do to infrastructure that's built, what, flooding can do to bridges and to the types of large-scale infrastructure that are built. The Congresswoman here mentioned that we have some competitors who are in this particular space who think they do this really well, but we've heard time and time again that, the type of infrastructure that the United States is able to build, the type of contractors, the type of businesses that go and help many of these developing countries that come from the United States, the quality of what they're able to bring absolutely has a climate impact. And that quality that we bring helps to withstand the floods, the changes that we're seeing in weather systems around the world. And that's something I think that goes beyond just U.S. values, it's U.S. quality, but it also brings an element of U.S. business to helping the impacts of climate change.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I want to see if my colleague Bren back there, do we have any questions? We do.
Oh, I know.
All right. Well, Bren's kept the trains running today, so we'll give her a round of applause as she walks up too.
Do not look like a shy crowd.
Thank you so much. All right. So we've got a little bit of time left, so I'm going to do a twofer real quick. So first is for the Congresswoman here. Congresswoman, how can America use its development and diplomacy tools to be preventative, not just responsive, when it comes to countering the threat of authoritarianism we talked about as it relates to U.S. interests abroad? Second here is for Chidi. So we'll go back and forth here. So Chidi, has there been a ripple effect of MCC's work in neighboring countries or regions, and is this helping America's national security? So go to the Congresswoman first. How does this really help be preventative and not responsive?
The question answers itself.
Yeah.
It's prevention. I mean, one of the things is, instead of just complaining and indicting African countries, for example, for accepting assistance, I went to Liberia and I was so stunned at the utter poverty. I mean, people who, during the rainy season, their house was 4 sticks in a tarp across the top, no libraries. And then all of a sudden I saw this huge white Coliseum rise up out of the ground. It was so disproportionate to everything else. Well, the Chinese built that. So instead of criticizing Liberia for accepting that quote unquote gift, which was very expensive to them, we have tremendous opportunities to lean into a country with all kinds of natural resources, a port that was falling apart, that needs to be rebuilt. And so this is the kind of stuff that we could do. proactively instead of just waiting around. So I think that the question answers itself. We have to see aid, assistance, things like, I'm glad the Ex-Im Bank is here today, right? Wave your hand. The Ex-Im Bank is really critical. Thank you. Thank you for coming. I knew you were going to be here. I mean, that is something that I have seen on a partisan sort of basis. I don't get it why some Republicans don't want to see the Ex-Im Bank thrive, but that, that means that somebody who's bottling pickles in Wisconsin can get their product out somewhere. And the Ex-Im Bank levels the playing field for places like China who heavily subsidize their companies and use government resources to leverage everything. And, we have an Ex-Im Bank that plays by the rules, does it the right way, and that we need to support that because the Ex-Im Bank mainly helps the United States more than it does other countries. So that's an example of us not giving aid to other countries, but aiding ourselves to be able to have commerce. So the question answers itself. This assistance is in lieu of trying to rescue people once things have all fallen down.
So, Chidi, what's that ripple effect? Yeah.
That ripple effect of, I think, what MCC has been able to see, again, being a young agency, people have been able to see through our 5-year compacts just what actually is tangibly put in front of them: a bridge, a road, transmission lines, increased energy that comes to a particular place. And I've had, the privilege of working, obviously, for the Department of Defense and its, subsidiary agencies. And I've never walked into a room where I wasn't welcome because, the U.S. typically projects, power and might, and that's what people want. Having come to MCC, I have been amazed at what, countries will come up to me and say, can I get an MCC project? And I'm like, well, you don't qualify. Maybe you're not a low middle income country. You're a high income country. That's okay. I just want to understand how I can do better on the scorecard. That's without me even putting a single dollar forward. You are seeing the interest come from several countries who want to just be able to improve their democracies, following a particular template that MCC has created that to them signifies what they're aiming to achieve. So we have seen in countries, particularly like in Cote d'Ivoire, I just came back from DRC, they have created scorecard units in their governments to work towards meeting these particular factors. That's without me even putting a dime on the table. I've already told you you're not eligible as a country. They're like, doesn't matter. I still want to aim towards this so that one day I will be eligible. To me, that's the kind of effect that MCC has been able to have. And I think if we're looking at, we call it the MCC effect. It is, you're not eligible for a program, but you could work towards the metrics of what makes a, sustainable democracy and a thriving economy by just putting some of these factors in place. So we have taken that and in our young years have gone back to Congress and said, we were doing this in one country at a bilateral level, but we want to see if we can maybe expand this a little bit and see what impacts we could have if we expand it to a regional. And so we have 2 new regional compacts that we've been working on. We just announced one with Cabo Verde, but we are also working on one with Cote d'Ivoire that will help to increase the energy across the West Africa power pool. So we are working bilaterally with Cote d'Ivoire, who is working with their multilateral organization, so ECOWAS, the Economic Community of West African States, and the West Africa Power Pool to show what impacts the transmission lines and the institutional reforms around the energy sector and selling energy at a marketplace rate rather than just giving energy at a subsidized level, really creating a market of energy. And that will have exponential effects across all of West Africa. So you're looking at 14 countries who, with a bilateral compact with MCC, will be impacted by our ability to be able to help them transform their energy sector. So regional effects, obviously, in the MCC effect, and for those who may not be able to be eligible right now for a compact. And then you have this regional compact initiative that we've recently been doing that allows other countries to benefit from the bilateral energy, the bilateral relationship that we have built.
Fantastic. And so the last question we have from the audience ties beautifully, whoever wrote this, thank you very much, because it ties beautifully into my final question here. Their question was, what are good talking points for people who ask why we should send money abroad when we have so many issues here at home. And our question to wrap up our conversation is, what's it worth? So what, we talked about this at the beginning here about, how does this matter to Wisconsin, Wisconsinites, Americans? In your words, what is it worth for Wisconsin, for America to lead globally, to commit to development and diplomacy? And how can people talk about it a little bit more effectively? So why don't we start with Chidi, and then we'll end on the Congresswoman.
I think a lot of it, as you said, has already been said. When the U.S. provides assistance, we do so for a number of important reasons. I think that benefit Americans, and I want to be really clear about that. I think the small investment that we make in foreign assistance really does tie back to not just our safety and security, but our markets, our economies, our business, our opportunities, and obviously our values. And we look at it very simply. When you have a safer world and you have, stable economies, as the Congresswoman said, it costs a lot more to go in after and try to fix the situation when you could have invested really small at the beginning to help develop an economy or a society. I think the other thing about what we are able to do when we invest U.S. taxpayer dollars abroad is really drive, our values, not just democracy, but all of the things that come with it. We talked about human rights. We talked about strengthening international health systems, advancing justice, protecting the democracy. Foreign assistance is not just designed to, do a one-stop check and then walk away. It's there to be a partnership, and inculcating that partnership and that relationship has long-term effects. We've been talking a lot about NATO. That is a 75-year partnership. Our compacts are a 5-year partnership with a country. And once we have that relationship, you hope that it's really hard to let that go, because you're now working with someone or working with a country that wants you there. So I think, our ability to be able to give foreign assistance to help tackle poverty and injustice and ultimately promote stability in the countries where we invest is key to what the U.S. promotes as a country and what we're able to provide as something that is unique from some of the other maybe strategic competitors that we're up against.
Congresswoman, last word.
Well, I mean, I would do well to just say amen. The only thing I would just add is just a shortcut way of saying it. When you are the world's wealthiest country in the world, when you have the highest standard of living here, I mean, people you're talking to, they might be complaining that they got a car that's 5 years old, versus somebody who, there are a lot of people who live off of less than $2 a day. And when you're the richest country in the world, you don't get to stand back and do nothing. That it's our responsibility as being a world leader to look out for the least of these. We look out for the least of these with our own interests in mind. What is the rate of return we can get from making investments? But also, what is the return that we get from just being a good steward? When we had the AIDS problem, I mean, by addressing it, George W. Bush, Barbara Lee, here was a pandemic that could have had a much greater impact on us, except that we sort of stopped it worldwide. That was an investment that saved lives here. Providing vaccines to the world, and our vaccines were better than the ones that China gave. We don't have any choice as the richest country in the world, but to act like we're the richest country in the world. And it's the same thing, the criticisms that people have of great basketball players or people that don't give back. We don't have any choice but to give back. That is what has made us the greatest country in the world. Our demonstration of caring about other people in the world. And I mean, 1% of our budget, that's all we have to pay for goodwill. When I go places, they have all the women and the kids in the village dancing. When we get there, people playing the drums, and they are glad to see us. They're happy to thank us for everything that we have done. Our goodwill means that we can go and travel abroad and be welcomed and not have it be like it was right after 9/11, where we were scared as Americans to go anywhere. You know, basically, we are welcome wherever we go in the world and beloved because of this role that we play.
Well, thank you both so much for the conversation today. I want to invite a friend and colleague, Eric, up here. Close this out.
All right, what an important discussion. Thank you so much. I would like to thank Representative Moore, Deputy CEO Blyden, and members of our Wisconsin Advisory Committee, and all of you who are here today. Thank you so much for coming. The best part of my job is working with leaders like all of you, and thank you again for your participation in this insightful discussion and on why America's leadership role in the world is critical to ensuring our economic prosperity and national security here at home. Your continued engagement to show why America's leadership matters to Wisconsin is very critical, and you are part of an important group of people around the world who have the ability to make an impact. On that note, if you are new to USGLC, please make sure to opt in for updates from our coalition. Thank you again for your support, your passion, and your voice. And because of people like you all across the country, America remains a leading force for good in the world. Thank you so much.